Hi, everyone. Thanks for your patience. We're starting a little bit late tonight, but welcome. We're so glad that you're here for Sweet Treats and Everyday Eats, Candied Citrus, and using your preserved citrus products. We are going to have a slightly different format from our other two that will be talking a little bit about the process, but then also talking about how to use your preserved citrus in different recipes. So it'll be a fun format, and you'll have lots of chances to ask questions. I'm Joya Conge. The Q&A monitors are Kirsten Hansen, Marina Shea. Our presenters are Kirsten, Nina Hoyman, Marina, Henry Shaw, and Monica Benavides. And a couple housekeeping items. If you could please keep your mics muted when you're not speaking, that would be really helpful for the recording. And when you leave this Zoom, a program survey will be sent to you. If you submit it, we'll send you the recipes and the slides via email. It may take a couple of days for that to happen, so please be patient. Um, Throughout the program, you can type your questions or comments using the Zoom Q&A feature. You can open this from the menu bar at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Just look for the Q&A with a little Q&A button with a box with a question mark in it. And if you don't see that and your menu is a little bit short, there's a more button with 3 dots. You click on that and you'll see an expanded menu and you can see the Q&A there. And as time allows, we'll open the floor for Q&A. We'll go through the ones that have been submitted and then allow for any kind of oral Q&A. So just raise your Zoom hand or just speak up when the time allows. And we ask that you don't use the chat except for technical difficulties so we can help our Q&A monitors surface the questions and manage them. So thank you in advance for keeping things running smoothly. So who are we? This is the online program of the UC Master Food Preserver program. It's a community outreach, online-based, grant-funded volunteer program of the University of California Cooperative Extension, and we're all volunteers. And we provide up-to-date research-based information on food safety and preservation to the public. So there's 2 caveats here. One is that um, uh, we don't represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of the University of California. And if you see any kind of brands or products that we might show in pictures, those are for illustrative purposes only, and don't imply any kind of official position of the University of California. Our mission is to keep Californians and the public safe and well as they use culturally appropriate research-based practices to safely preserve food in the home. We want to reduce food waste, we want to increase food security, and we want to provide fun and engaging ways for Californians and the public to explore healthy food. So today's program is a little bit different, as I said earlier. We're going to start out with candied citrus rinds from Sue Mossbacher, Sue Mossbacher, and with some recipes from Marina and Monica. And then we'll move into exploring ways to use preserved citrus that we covered in our previous classes on January 5th and February 9th. So that's dehydrated citrus salts, curds, marmalade, and salt preserved lemons. And that'll be from the rest of the team. And then at the end, if we have time, we'll answer your questions and discuss all things citrus. So to start, I guess we'll talk about preserving candied citrus rinds. And we're going to start actually with a video that Sue produced. And that's only a minute. So let me know if we need to run it more than once.
When you're juicing citrus, don't toss those rinds. You can repurpose those scrap rinds into a tasty treat of candied rinds. Step 1. Clean out the juiced rinds. Using a serrated grapefruit spoon works well to scoop out the membranes and the extra pith. Step 2. Cut the rinds into thin strips. Try to keep the size consistent. Step 3. Boil the rinds in fresh cold water 3 times. As soon as the water starts to boil, drain it, refill the pot with fresh cold water to boil again. This removes the bitterness and softens the rinds. Step 4. Cook the rinds in a sugar syrup. 1 cup of water to 4 cups of sugar. Bring it to a boil, then gently reduce to a simmer, cooking gently until the peels are translucent and tender, about an hour. Using tongs, remove the peels to the dry.
Oop.
When you're juicing citrus, don't
Where did that?
let
Sorry.
them drain and dry for about 4 to 5 hours. If you want to candy the candied rinds even more, roll the peels in fine sugar to coat. Candy rinds are a fun treat to make.
All right. Should I play that one more time, or is everyone good? Looks like people are, okay, I'm getting a thumbs up.
When you're juicing.
So we have a variation on this from Marina, Candied Buddha's Hand. Marina, would you like to take the
Yeah,
floor?
so I just followed the instructions that you saw in that little video, although we got to skip one step and add another at the end. Why? Buddha's hand, if you haven't ever played around with it, are these wild, gnarly looking things. The two pictures on the left are sort of a fat hand and a sort of a skinnier kind of hand. But what's unique about the fruit is that it has no actual flesh inside. It's just all pith and outside. So you can candy absolutely all of it. So we got to skip step one because there is no flesh to scoop out. But then I cut them into even strips. I parboiled it only once. Buddha's hand tends to be very mild, not very bitter. And that parboiling process that the video says do 3 times, you can adjust for your citrus fruit based on how bitter it seems to taste. And then I did a sugar syrup just following that 4-to-1 ratio based on how much I had in the pan just to cover it. And brought it up to a boil and took it essentially to that candy stage. Next slide. And then there I laid it out on the drying rack. I left these overnight just until I felt like they got a little bit dry enough to handle, but were still tacky. And then I rolled about half of them in a fine sugar. I just ran some sugar through, a coffee grinder. And then the step that I added at the end to make some of them a little fancier was that I dipped the ends in dark chocolate. So very simple process, but that's Candy's Buddha Hand. Let's see, Kirsten, you want to talk about cookies?
Absolutely. Yes, thank you. So Monica is not here, but she made a wonderful recipe of oatmeal cookies with candied lemon peel. So it's a great way to add some delicious citrus flavor to cookies, or potentially other baked goods. You can see here some of the candied peel that she had, and then she chopped it up and put it in the oatmeal cookies. And that recipe will be sent out after the presentation if you are interested. So that's one more way to use some of your candied citrus.
I would just add that Monica said when she made her candied citrus that she was afraid that it came out too bitter, but when she cut it all up and put it into the cookies, it turned out to be just delicious and a perfect balance.
So I wanted to pause here and see if we had any questions about candied citrus or either one of these recipes that was presented today. Do we have any questions in the Q&A?
We do have one question about recipes and links from our previous events from someone who attended those events, and Travis is answering that question right now.
Oh, great.
So those will be sent soon. And a question from Beth, can you remind us the step for boiling in the sugar water? And another question, and the follow-up is boil and then simmer for how long?
Yeah, so you want to boil them in a sort of a syrup mixture. It's 4 parts of sugar to 1 part of water, and just enough to your sugar is going to dissolve, and then you're going to just cook them until you can really tell when they go translucent. They get very soft and translucent, but you can also take it up to about 215 or so if you have an instant read thermometer or a candy thermometer, and that'll take it up high enough to then dry.
Thank you very much. And we have an additional question from Monica, a different Monica. I suppose oranges have to be ripe in order to candy the rinds. And I'll let folks who've done more candying than I have it take this one.
Yeah, I haven't candied orange rinds before, but basically I think the candying process is just anything that you think you're willing to eat. You can candy. And some things that maybe you wouldn't necessarily want to be eating um, in that state, but you would if they got nice and soft and had a little crystalline crust.
But for this particular one, I do think that you probably want the rind of the oranges to be ripe, right? So you wouldn't want to use a rind that's still green because you're just not going to get a lot of that tasty zest flavor. Um, and we have an additional question. Once the peels are candied, how long will they keep and how should we store them?
Well, you want to store them airtight because they'll want to get sort of soft and tacky again, and they're sort of already a little bit soft, and that's fine. I find that whenever you're doing anything that involves drying, it often helps to put a little packet of food safe silica gel into whatever container, like just a Tupperware. Here actually, this is a Tupperware of some of the candied rinds, and I don't have my little silica gel pack in this one. I think it's the big pack, the big package. But that can help. How long do they keep? It's like a dried fruit. But if as long as it's cool and dry, it should store certainly for several months, or I've had dried fruit last a lot longer.
And we also have a question about any differences in the recipe for various kinds of citrus, blood oranges, mandarins, kumquats, etc. And we addressed this a little bit in terms of sort of the thicker your rind or the more bitter, the more times you'll want to blanch. But are there any changes other than that that you would suggest?
You can candy whole kumquats, and there is a recipe on the MFP website for making little kumquat flowers by cutting them partially through into quarters.
Oh, thank you. That's a great one. Um, and Monica did comment that Valencia oranges are orange for many months before they are ripe. So I think again, um, perhaps paying attention to the ripeness of the peel rather than the fruit. And we also have a question about, is there an optimal thickness for the optimal thickness of the peel for candying?
Not really. You want to get all the flesh off, but perhaps somewhat counterintuitively, the pith is really part of what you're eating. You want to boil that until it goes translucent, and hence the parboiling and the boiling makes that edible. So just as long as they're even, because then you'll get more even cooking.
And that's the end of our Q&A regarding candying citrus peels for now. Thank you, everyone.
Great. Thanks, Kirsten. So there'll be lots of opportunities to break and ask questions, but the next section is we're going to explore ways to use the preserved citrus that we talked about in the last two classes. So that's including the dehydrated citrus, citrus salts, curds, marmalade, and salt preserved. So we'll be going through by each dehydration or I'm sorry, for each preservation method, we'll pause and take questions as time allows. And then at the end, we'll also ask for questions. So I think the first up is using dehydrated citrus. Kirsten?
1 sec, my video is on and functioning. Hooray! So dehydrated citrus is a really lovely way to preserve citrus, especially when you have a whole lot of it and you want to preserve it, but maybe don't have time or have more than enough marmalade in your life. So as you can see here, we've got thin slices of citrus that have been dried. They make a lovely garnish on a cheese board or a charcuterie board. And if I could have the next slide, we also have some more ideas. So I have been using my dehydrated citrus slices in tea. They're a lovely and easy way to add lemon or other citrus to your morning tea. I like mine especially with some honey as well. And I appreciate it because I can get that citrus flavor without cluttering up my refrigerator with half lemons. Um, if you have a lot of dehydrated citrus, they also make lovely garlands, or you can use single pieces as ornaments during the holiday season, or in fact, year round. And we'll have the next slide. You can also use this slices in mocktails or cocktails as a garnish, or again, to add a little bit of citrus flavor. And I actually will also put dehydrated citrus slices just into my water bottle while I'm going about my day. And that was a very quick overview of just dehydrated citrus rounds, but if anyone has questions, I'm happy to take them. Okay,
Looks like we can move on to our next one.
yeah.
Citrus curds. Marina?
Oh, so citrus curds, we did a whole program on sort of sweet treats from citrus and curds and marmalades. So here you've got just an example of a curd. That little bit on the spoon is one of the ways that I tend to eat a lot of my curd, which is just kind of right off of the spoon. And there are lots of other fancy things you can do. Layering them into various baked cakes and cheesecakes and so on is also very common. Next slide. So one way you can think about how to use the curds is in sort of different methods. Most of them don't require a recipe. Just as a spread, so on toast, scones, pancakes, waffles, crepes, dumping it right on top of ice cream. On that kind of theme, you can use it as a flavoring agent, so you can mix it into yogurt, kind of the way you get that little layer of fruit on the bottom of yogurt sometimes that you just can stir in, or you can stir it right into whipped cream and make a kind of a mousse. You can use that, or just the curd itself layered into a parfait. And then you can do all sorts of different baked goods, and there are many, many different choices on the web and elsewhere. One example that will be in the recipe packet is a lemon bread pudding. It actually doesn't even have to be lemon curd. It can be any kind of citrus curd that you layer into a bread pudding. And one of the things I inevitably wind up doing when I make a curd is I have all of those egg whites, because I like to use curd recipes that do use a lot of solo yolks. And so I wind up making meringues. And so on the far right, you have just little meringue nests that have the curd in them because they make a nice complement to each other. And marmalades can be used, again, in many different kind of baking experiments. Like I think in the recipe packet, there's a generic bar recipe that you can use to sandwich not just marmalade, but any kind of jams or jellies or preserves into sort of like an oatmeal nut bar. And marmalade muffins is another recipe that you'll find in the recipe packet, but ways to use those jars of marmalade. So if anyone has questions about jellies and curds, or marmalades and curds, oh, I see one in the Q&A. Can you add curd to a crust like a little tart, or does it need to be mixed with something else? So I want to clarify the question. If that's like, can you just make baby tarts with just the curd as like a little baby lemon meringue pie? Absolutely. In fact, lemon curd basically is lemon meringue pie without the meringue on the top. um, and I haven't seen recipes in which you mix the curd in, to make part of a crust. But there are so many recipes out there. I assume that's possible. I am seeing, okay. At this point, I don't see any other questions, so please just keep using that Q&A feature. I'm going to take us on to the next kind of preserved item. We talked about this in the first citrus program, which is citrus salts. Here are some examples. This is a Meyer lemon Malden, big Malden flakes on the far left. In the center is a chili lime salt that has turned into one of my go-tos. And on the far right is an orange salt. And you can use, big flakes, you can use fine flakes, you can mix salts up, and it literally is just citrus rind and salt. And you dry it, and then sometimes you can pulverize it in addition. So if you go to the next slide, you can just see some ways in which you can incorporate citrus salts into just your daily kitchen work. Just any place where you would use salt, but also might want a little bit of that citrus flavoring. So my go-to all the time is on avocados, particularly if I don't have a slice of fresh lemon or lime to squeeze right onto my avocado. You can put it onto different snack foods like, tater tots or popcorn. You can use salts to put the salt ring on the rim of your cocktail glasses. The chili lime works particularly nicely there. And then, of course, anywhere you would use salt as a finisher, again, it tends to hold the flavor better as a finisher. So on meats, on salads, on vegetables, all very simple ways to use citrus salts. I just want to add, by the way, you can use exactly the same process and mix zest with sugar and have lemon sugar, orange sugars, and so on. And some of those you can use directly in baking, or you sprinkle them onto various sweet foods. Okay. Again, I don't see any questions, so.
Can you talk a little bit about the citrus sugars? So it's the same. So can you just walk through quickly how you do that?
Sure. You just mix zest, and I like to use microplane, very fine zest, with sugar, and I've done it with just plain granulated sugar. You could use something like a Demara if you wanted some bigger crystals or something that might, hold the crunch and the color later. And you can put things in a dehydrator, but I tend to find that I think it tends to mute the flavor of the zest a little bit. So if you can just spread it out on like a cookie sheet or in just a big flat casserole dish, so it can get air. And if you rub the zest in with the sugar, or for that matter, the salt a little bit, it'll tend to help the oils transfer. And then you just let it get dry.
Oh, great.
Put it in a bottle.
Because I know in citrus salt, some recipes call for putting it in the oven with sugar. That would make a little bit of a mess, I think.
And I was just thinking we could blend the whole thing and make a kettle corn that had a citrus flavor.
Yeah, I'm hungry. This whole thing is making me hungry. Do we have any other questions? I know we're running through these very quickly. All right, if we don't have any other questions, we'll move on to using salt preserved lemons. And we have a group of master food preservers who'll talk about the different ways they've used them. First up, we have salt preserved lemons used in various ways. Who'd like to start?
I can start.
Hey, Nina, let me spotlight you.
Next slide. Oop, no, okay.
Wait. All right, I think we're ready to go.
Okay. So actually, this is just an example of something that I made a couple of weeks ago with some preserved lemons. But what I want to do is do a little demo. So I think it's best if you can see me real clearly.
Stop sharing.
Very good. Okay. All right. So in Citrus 1, we made the traditional salt preserved lemons, and we showed a slide of how to do that with another master food preserver, Deborah and I. And so we can get you that recipe and a link to it, even if you look at that program.
No.
Pardon? But we'll put that in the chat later. So the ingredients for the salt preserved lemons are just lemons, water, and salt. Some of the recipes call for spices as an optional ingredient. And after the salt preserved lemons have finished their fermentation process, they're stored in the refrigerator in a jar like this. So we use homegrown Meyer lemons for making the preserved lemons. I believe you can use other kinds too, but the Meyers have a thin skin, which works very well for the preserved lemons. Now, the salt preserved lemons are really salty because it's the salt that's actually doing the preserving. And that's what prevents the bacteria from multiplying. And the salt especially accumulates in the flesh of the lemon, but it also penetrates into the peel. And because the flesh of the lemon becomes really salty, the most common recommendation that you'll see is to separate out the peel from the flesh and use only the peel. So when they come out of the jar, you might have a whole one that's cut into still retaining its whole lemon shape, depending on which way you did it. Or if you did like I did, you cut them into quarters. So this is how they are coming out of the jar. And it's very easy to remove the salty flesh. So then you have just the peel left. Now, it's a good idea to rinse the peel if you don't want to have excess salt. So you rinse the peel, you can just let it drip dry. And then you're going to cut the lemon peels into little dice. And then it can be incorporated into a lot of different recipes. Like so. So for example, we made some hummus and it incorporated the preserved lemon peels into the hummus, but also makes a nice little garnish for the top. You can add it to almost any dish, soups. This is a grain bowl with some veggies. You could add it to a salad dressing and put it on any salad. And it's a wonderful condiment. It really adds a lot of brightness and versatile. It's very versatile. So Henry's also going to show a few examples of other ways to use it. And that's the end.
Thanks, Nina. All right. I guess I'll pause here, and this is Nina's slide here that kind of has more of a close-up of the kale salad and hummus. Did you have any other things, any comments on this, Nina?
No, just I know there was a slide that gave other examples of how to use them.
Okay.
There was a previous slide too.
Oop. Kirsten, did you want to take this one?
Sure, absolutely. So there are lots of ways to use it. So there's ice cream recipes for preserved lemon ice cream on the internet. One of the things I like about preserved lemons is they're an opportunity to add a lot of lemon flavor without adding a lot of lemon juice. So it's really great in areas where you might not need the extra moisture or want the extra moisture. As we saw, you can add it to hummus, you could add it to guacamole. Lots of grain salads, as Nina just demonstrated. Soups and stews is, in fact, very traditional, and chicken casseroles like Moroccan tagines, which is, of course, the traditional use for salt preserved lemons. Um, and I'll also note that someone in the chat, forgive me, Penny, thank you. Penny in the chat mentioned that she made a batch of preserved lemons and put some in her rice cooker, and it was amazing. So yeah, preserved lemons go wonderfully with grains of every kind, including rice.
Just do it.
Um, and Nina was showing us all kinds of savory preparations and ideas with preserved lemons, which is the traditional way to use them. But I have a sweet tooth, and so I made a preserved lemon tea cake, and it was delicious. You can see here that the end result is extremely yellow because you actually use a little bit of turmeric in the batter, so it's a really lovely color. I didn't use a additional lemon drizzle, though you could. Um, and in this recipe, you actually use the whole lemon, and I didn't even rinse it, and it's not overly salty. It's just it's not a too sweet dessert. So that recipe will be going out with the rest of our recipes. And if anyone is thinking that this is perhaps a little bit strange, my husband, who is not a fan of some of my stranger dessert proclivities, did say that it was the most delicious and lemony thing he's ever tasted. So again, preserved lemons are a wonderful way to add a ton of lemon flavor without having to zest a bunch of lemons or use a lot of lemon juice.
And I'll talk about another savory use for salt preserved lemons. This is a very traditional dish. It's chicken with salt preserved lemons and olives. It's basically a bunch of thinly sliced onions, some olives. You can use green or black. I'm using a combination of both. Some minced garlic and preserved lemon that I've rinsed to get some of the salt off of it. And I like to use the pulp. It just adds more flavor to it. You mash the pulp into a paste and then slice the rinds into little strips. And then my recipe, which is in the handout, also uses some bottle sliced artichoke hearts. So you want to cut them into bite-sized pieces, and a thinly sliced fennel bulb, which adds an interesting anise or licorice flavor, but very subtle to the dish. You layer all those vegetables in a baking dish, season them with a little bit of thyme, pepper, and a bay leaf or two, and then nestle chicken thighs in this bed of veggies. Ideally, you want to use skin on and bone in chicken thighs. Next. I'm going to add some white wine. This pan, it's a fairly large pan with, I think, 10 chicken thighs in it. Has about a cup of wine and then enough chicken stock to cover the bed of vegetables. The skin of the chicken should be up above the liquid level. You can season the top of the chicken with a little paprika, some black pepper, and a few chili flakes if you're so inclined. And you can add a little bit of salt, but it's best to add the salt at the end because, as we've said, those preserved lemons are pretty salty, and it's best to just taste your dish at the end and then adjust your seasoning as the final step. Next, you pop that in an oven at about 350 degrees C. Fahrenheit, sorry, until the chicken is cooked and starting to brown. The sauce should be bubbly all throughout the pan. And you can run it under a broiler to finish the browning of chicken skin and crisp it up a little bit. And the final product is shown here on the right. You want to serve it over something that'll absorb that delicious sauce and veggies, the soft veggies, and like rice or pasta. A tip, next slide. Both the chicken and the vegetables are going to render a bunch of liquid. So often you'll have a very saucy, liquid in the pan, and you can concentrate that down. You ladle off most of the liquid, skim off the fat, boil it down while the chicken is browning under the broiler. And I usually add a little cornstarch slurry to the boiling sauce to thicken it. And then you add that boiled down sauce back to the pan and mix it back in with the vegetables. That's it. It's a very delicious and simple recipe. Great for parties. Doesn't take much, tending, and it can sit in the oven, in a warm oven, and stay good if you have to wait to serve it. There are many recipes on the internet for similar dishes. And that's all. Any questions?
I will note that for all of you who now want to immediately rush off and make some salt preserved lemons, thank you to Nina for posting the recipe that was used in our previous class in the chat. So make sure you open that. And again, it will be out in the recipe packets also if you attended the previous classes, but it's easy and available here.
Thanks, Kirsten. Yeah, do we have any other any other questions? Does anyone want to come off of mute and ask a question?
Yes, Joy, I had one.
Okay.
I know it's back at the beginning and I didn't have a chance to actually ask this, but when it comes after you candy them or put them in the water mixture, the rinds, the citrus rinds, when you guys say leave them out on the drying tray, is that just like leaving them out? Do you put them inside an oven? Can you put them in a dehydrator like this? What does that drying process consist of? Is it just leaving it out and letting it harden?
Yeah, I mean, you can just put them on a rack and leave them out, and they will firm up and become dry to the touch. Certainly in a day, often less than that, depending on the weather and the humidity. You can speed up that process some. I've put them into a dehydrator at just a very, very low temperature. And that will make it go a little faster. I wanted these to sort of stay a little tacky because I knew I was going to re-roll them in sugar, and so I just took the regular way.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I just saw the rack and was like, oh shoot, I didn't hear if they said oven or if they said outside.
Yeah.
Okay, no, I appreciate the clarification.
And if you do an oven, by the way, to dehydrate, it's a good idea if you can, and if you can do so safely, given who's in your household, to prop the door open a little bit. Like put it on the very lowest temperature, and then prop the door open because that'll help the moisture escape.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for the tip.
Great question. Any other questions? Or favorite recipes?
We have a question from someone who didn't attend the other two sessions and wants to know if they can get the recipe packet. Travis?
Yes, I've sent some responses on that topic. If you're able to visit our past events page, we'll have that in the chat and I think a future slide, and view the recordings. There'll be instructions on completing the post-event survey. And then once that survey submission is received, I'll follow up with you with copies of our slide deck and recipe handout. So we are gratefully asking for survey responses, and in exchange will provide the slide decks and recipe handouts.
Penny notes that she supremed some mandarins and canned them. Penny, did you use a pectinase or did you
I
hand
did.
do them?
I heard about pectinase and I was fascinated, so I just had to try it. I had 10 pounds of mandarins. After peeling, I had 8 pounds left, so I was able to soak them in the pectinase and, look at this process. And then when they came out, they were just gorgeous. They're just these little jars of sunshine. So it was a wonderful experience. And now I want to supreme like everything. Canned citrus.
For people who don't know, supreming means taking off the skin on the citrus segment. And pectinase is an enzyme that actually dissolves pectin or attacks pectin. So you put it in there and it just magically
And I had to look it up.
dissolves the stuff. Yeah.
I had to look up supreming. I'm like, what is that, like a singing group? Or so yeah, it was a very interesting chemistry lesson too. So
How long did that whole process take? It was mandarin, so they were small, right?
Yeah, it was, first of all, you have to peel them all. And I saved all of them and I candied all my mandarin orange rice too. So I definitely used all of the handouts from the first couple of sessions. And I'm one of those people that I hate pith. So if I have an orange, I like peel off every little white bit. And so I'm peeling these mandarins, and even though they're very easy to peel, I still had the pith. So I thought, oh man, I don't know really how long to soak. So I had heard some people said, oh, only a couple of hours. But after a couple of hours, I really didn't see any progress. And I ended up actually being about 18 to 20 hours is how long I soaked it. And then in retrospect, after that, I probably didn't rinse it enough because I saw, this is an enzyme. It's going to get on your food. So, and I thought it tasted kind of funny when I tasted one of them. And then everybody else was like, "No, man, no, there's no funny taste." So I think I just had a sensitive tongue for the moment. But they were delicious. I mean, especially after I did a light syrup, canned them in a very light syrup, and they were just wonderful. I don't ever want to buy those little 4-ounce cans for $2 a piece or whatever ever again.
Thanks, Penny. Any other questions? Comments?
It looks like we might have had a
Yeah,
question from
sorry.
Ann.
I'll tell you, I've made preserved lemons for a long time, and today I made pasta with ricotta and spinach, and I put some preserved lemons on it. But it's a fairly new batch. I have 2 batches that I put in the refrigerator, and it seems to me it's only been a couple of weeks, and I can't remember how long before they really start tasting like preserved lemons. It tasted more like lemon peel. I mean, I know the process and I did it, but I thought probably needs another couple of months. Does anybody have an idea of an ideal time before it really starts tasting like a preserved lemon? No.
Nina,
Nina?
go ahead, take it away.
Sure, I have read that they should be, the fermentation would be a couple of weeks
Yeah, I did
at
that.
room temperature, and you're
Right.
rotating them every day
Right.
to redistribute the salt, right? And then and in a cool, dark place.
Right.
And I've only done it with Meyer lemons, so I don't know about other lemons. But I have read that normally they recommend that they get a little more kind of mature in the refrigerator after a couple of weeks. But you said a couple of months, and you didn't.
No, actually, I did it in January, and I know the procedure. I'm a master food preserver also, and I know how to do it. But I think it's been in the refrigerator a couple weeks, and I was surprised how mild it was this time. These are regular. These are Eureka, not Meyer.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And
So
I was
they're
surprised, that I thought
are-
I better keep them another couple before I start using them. A couple in the refrigerator, of course.
Right, because those are going to have a little thicker skin. The Meyers have a very thin skin.
Right.
So
Right.
I haven't tried it with the Eureka, but that's very good input to know that it might take longer in the refrigerator for them to reach the flavor that you want. I have found that after a week or 2 in the fridge, they're fine for me. But
Yeah, I like a lemon, and it was with ricotta and spinach pasta. It's a delicious recipe, and garlic. But I thought it could be more lemony. Anyway.
Just to clarify, the salt preserved lemons actually don't ferment. The salt concentration is much too high to allow fermentation organisms to live in it. So it's really just salt drawing the liquid out of the lemon rind itself. And I leave them out in the cabinet for up to a month, which is not recommended.
No, it's not. I don't do that.
But
I want to see any mold on it.
but it is so concentrated. If you have the right amount of salt, I mean, it's super saturated. I have salt in the bottom of my
Yeah, I do too.
Undissolved salt.
Do you use canning salt? I use canning salt.
Canning salt, of course.
Yeah, exactly. No, yeah, exactly. Okay. Oh, well, anyway.
Canning salt or pure salt, any salt that doesn't have any anti-caking ingredients or iodine or
exactly.
colorants added to it.
Yeah. You can use kosher. Apparently, some of the kosher salts
Some of the
Um,
kosher salts, we covered that actually in the first one. Some examples of even some fancy sea salts
Oh,
actually have a
Muldoon,
whole
I have that.
have a whole, but some of them have a whole bunch of stuff added to it.
Oh, do
Um,
they?
you know,
Read the box. Read the
sodium
box.
ferrocyanide, which is a anti-caking agent, all sorts of stuff.
Yeah. Well, also they're very expensive, so I would not use that to preserve lemons or use it as
You,
this. Yeah. Anyway.
you wouldn't want to use molten salt for
Okay. Well,
preserving
anyway.
lemons.
Okay. Well, thank you.
I just wanted to add, if we're talking about salt preserved lemons, that the juice that comes off of them, I mean, you can pull the lemons out and use them
Right.
in cooking and stuff, but don't throw away that nice salty juice, because you can just
Really?
use it where you use, salt. It's delicious.
It's very concentrated. That's very quick.
Very salty.
Kind of thick. Yeah. Viscous. Yeah. Anyway. Okay.
I just used that, for example, in hummus the other day. We didn't have any more of the lemons, but I had
Okay.
the juice.
I love the preserved lemons. I really do. I think they're great.
So Penny asks an interesting question. Could you use the lemon brine? Now, I didn't get into this, but since we have a couple of minutes, I will tell you what I did when I made the lemons. I juiced some of the lemons.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, you can use the lemon brine the same way Marina described after you fermented the lemons. But when I preserved my lemons, I ended up with a bunch of lemon peels. And I went through the process of soaking them in a sugar solution. And then I got a very thick lemony syrup, which makes for a great thing to add to sodas and, mineral water and stuff. And then I dried the lemon peels in my dehydrator. So that was from the portion of the lemons that I juiced to add to the liquid when I made my preserved lemons. So I actually had no waste whatsoever from my lemon preservation project. Anyway, there's ways you can use just about any part of that lemon, except the seeds maybe.
Actually, so because seeds are concentrated in pectin, if you're making any marmalade, you can set them aside and put them in cheesecloth and use them to firm up your marmalade.
Great. Lemons are fun.
So do we have any other questions? Was there any questions in the Q&A?
We do. We have a question. Has anyone freeze-dried lemons? And I don't know if anyone on here has one of the home freeze dryers. There's only a couple of MFPs that we know of who have home freeze dryers right now. They're pretty new to the general consumer market. But it looks like Penny has a comment. So Penny, do you have insight here?
I'm very fortunate in that I do have a freeze dryer. And so in lemon season, I've just gone through and I've freeze dried a whole bunch of lemons. And I'm real excited to try them in multitudes of ways because I've always given them away before I've really done anything with them. So this year it's trying the reconstitute in your favorite tea. That's very simple to do. I want to try powdering them and seeing how that works on pastas or other types of foods like that. I'm a little skeptical only because I freeze dried full slices. So I have not only the meat and the rind and the zest. So some people are okay with that bitterness, but I'm the one that peels all the pith off, so I'm not so sure I would use it that way. But I do find that they're very nice to drop into a cup of hot tea. It's just they just rehydrate and they look like a slice of lemon. It's fascinating.
That's so cool. I'm jealous. We'll have to try. Yeah, we're talking about possibly doing a class on freeze-dried foods, but we have a couple of food preserve, only a few who have the equipment. Any other questions before we kind of wrap up here in the last few minutes?
We just have a note from Kathy in the chat saying that she has a freeze dryer and she wants to try peeling them and freeze drying them. So Kathy, please try that and let us know how it goes.
Please report back. All right. If there are no more questions or comments, I guess I'll start wrapping us up here. We have a couple of online programs that are coming up. We have, well, not we, but the San Mateo San Francisco group has a flavorful, flexible fermentation class that's coming up next Sunday from 2 to 3. And you can find that at the San Mateo Public Library site. We can submit include the link in the email, follow-up email. Every month we have an Ask a Master Food Preserver session the first Wednesday of each month from 7 to 8. And then the San Joaquin County folks are doing Mushroom Mania, Preserving the Flavor. That's an online class also. And we'll send that link over. I think you can find that actually on our website at mfp.ucanr.edu/events. And here's a link for the past events that I know that was put in the chat. So thank you team for doing that. And additional ways to stay in touch with us. I know that those have been put in the chat also. We have a monthly newsletter with tips and announcements for our upcoming classes. We're on social media on Facebook, Instagram, and we have a YouTube channel as well. You can submit a question to our help desk if you have a question. And the link was also put in the chat. Thank you, Marina and Henry, for that. And if you're interested in becoming a master food preserver yourself, there's information on our website. We have a class. Shout out to the 2025 group. I know Penny is part of that. And it's a lot of fun. People are really kind, and we're always playing around with food. All right. When you leave the Zoom, a little survey will pop up, and this is really important information for us to help us improve our programs and classes and continue the program. Once you submit it, well, maybe not exactly when you submit it, but in a few days, you'll receive the recipe handouts and the slides via email. And thank you to the team. Thank you to everyone who asked questions. Thank you to the Q&A and everyone who helped us put this together tonight. Thanks, everyone.